The feeling of being watched. Have you ever had that spine-tingling sensation, the hair on the back of your neck standing up, your skin prickling with an eerie discomfort, as though someone or something was silently watching you? Perhaps you glanced around, only to see nothing. No footsteps behind you, no shadows lurking in the dark, and yet the feeling lingered. You couldn't shake it off. It's a primal kind of fear, the type that resides deep in our subconscious. Maybe you brushed it off as paranoia, the side effect of a long night, too little sleep, or an overactive imagination. You told yourself it was nothing, that your mind was playing tricks on you. Most of the time, that's exactly the case. Psychologists have long known that the human brain is hyper-aware of patterns in our environment, especially in the dark. Evolution has trained us to be cautious when visibility is low, when our senses are dampened, and when the unknown surrounds us. The rustling of leaves at night, a creaking floorboard, a flicker of movement in the shadows. Our mind fills in the gaps, conjuring threats where none exist. This phenomenon, while deeply unsettling, is also protective. It has helped our ancestors avoid predators and survive countless dangers. But what happens when that feeling isn't just a false alarm? What if your instincts were right, but nobody believes you? What if someone or something was truly there, hidden just beyond your field of vision, waiting? History is littered with strange accounts of people who disappeared seemingly into thin air right after reporting feelings of being followed or watched. These stories, many of them never solved, haunt investigators, families, and communities for decades. In this compilation, we delve deep into some of the most chilling, mind-bending, and mystifying disappearances ever recorded. Some of these individuals were last seen in crowded parks or hiking trails. Others vanished in remote mountains, dense forests, or even while vacationing in populated cities. Some left behind cryptic notes. Some were caught in disturbing security footage moments before they vanished, and others simply walked out one day and never returned. Many of these disappearances are still unsolved to this day, and the speculation surrounding them only grows. These are not ordinary missing persons cases. These are stories that challenge logic and stretch the limits of what we consider possible. The people involved range in age, background, and circumstance, yet each case shares something in common: the absence of closure. No body, no trace, no definitive explanation, just echoes of people who once were. As you read these stories, allow yourself to ask the uncomfortable questions. What truly happened to these individuals? Were they victims of foul play accidents, secret operations, or something even more bizarre and unfathomable? Could the overwhelming power of fear have led them astray? Or were they right to be afraid? Get ready to explore the unexplained. These are not just tales of mystery. They are reminders that sometimes reality can be more haunting than fiction. Kenny Veach and the M Cave. Mystery. Kenny Veach was not your average weekend hiker. He was a rugged adventurer, a man who had spent countless hours trekking alone through some of the harshest terrains in the American Southwest. At 47 years old, he was well known among online hiking communities and had built a reputation for venturing where others dared not tread. The Mojave Desert, with its scorching heat, jagged cliffs, and vast emptiness, was his playground. He was a minimalist, preferring to hike with only the bare essentials. No GPS, no compass, often no map. To many, that would seem careless. But to Kenny, it was a test of self-reliance. He prided himself on reading the land and relying on instinct. His online alias, Snake Bitmg, reflected both his eccentricity and his daredevil tendencies. He once picked up a rattlesnake during a hike and was bit in an incident that didn't deter him from future outings. On YouTube, he left comments on various videos about mysterious military installations and strange desert phenomena. It was under one of these videos titled "Son of an Area 51 Technician" that Kenny left the comment that would come to define the rest of his life and perhaps his disappearance. He described finding an M-shaped cave in the Sheep Mountains near Nellis Air Force Base. What made the cave unforgettable, he wrote, was the sensation he felt as he approached it. His body began to vibrate. The closer he got to the cave's entrance, the stronger the sensation became. It wasn't just a mild tingling, it was an overwhelming, full-body hum that filled him with fear. He panicked and ran. He didn't go inside. Other YouTube users were intrigued. They urged him to go back and film his expedition. Kenny agreed, and later uploaded a video of his hike in the area, searching for the mysterious M cave. He carried a handgun and a camera, documenting his progress, but he couldn't find the cave again. His viewers, disappointed, questioned his story and challenged him to try again. Just days later, on November 10th, 2014, Kenny Veach told his girlfriend he was heading back out to the Sheep Mountains for another overnight hike, this time to find the cave once and for all. He never returned. 10 days later, his cell phone was found near an abandoned mine shaft, the very one he had filmed near in his previous video. A massive search was launched, over 30 volunteers, helicopters, desert patrols. But there was no trace of Kenny. No body, no gear, nothing. The internet erupted with theories. Did Kenny discover something he wasn't supposed to? Was the M cave some kind of hidden military installation? Could he have fallen into a mine shaft or perished from exposure? Or, more grimly, had he taken his own life? A woman claiming to be his girlfriend later commented online that Kenny had been suffering from depression and had quit his job. She believed he may have committed suicide, but many aren't convinced. There was no note, no remains, and no definitive explanation. The mysterious M cave has never been found, despite numerous hikers attempting to locate it. Kenny Veach remains one of the most chilling cases of modern disappearance, a man drawn to the unknown, possibly swallowed by it. Trenny Lynn Gibson, the teen who vanished in a crowd. One of the most baffling disappearances in U.S. history involves a 16-year-old girl named Trenny Lynn Gibson. Unlike other missing persons cases that occur in remote or unpopulated areas, Trenny disappeared in broad daylight in a national park surrounded by classmates. Her case has puzzled investigators, haunted her family, and spawned decades of speculation. How could someone vanish so completely, so quietly, and so quickly? On October 8, 1976, Trenny boarded a bus with approximately 35-40 classmates from Bearden High School in Knoxville, Tennessee. Their destination was the Great Smoky Mountains National Park, a popular spot for tourists and hikers alike. Oddly enough, most students weren't even told where they were going until they arrived at the park. That day, the plan was to hike about 1.8 miles from Klingman's Dome to Andrews Bald, and then return via the Forney Ridge Trail. While the hike was moderately challenging, it was considered safe, and the large group seemed well equipped to handle it, at least on the surface. However, there were clear red flags. Despite the large group of students, only one teacher and the bus driver were designated as chaperones. As the hike progressed, students naturally split up based on walking pace. Trenny was seen walking with different clusters of classmates throughout the day, never sticking to a fixed group. Then, at some point in the afternoon around 3:00 p.m., she was last seen by other students near Klingman's Dome. According to reports, she paused and looked to the right side of the trail as if she had seen something. Then she stepped off the path and was never seen again. As soon as her absence was noticed, a search was launched. But the terrain, dense with fall foliage and steep drops, made things extremely difficult. Helicopter searches were hindered by thick tree cover and changing weather conditions. Instead, search teams relied on trained tracking dogs, including bloodhounds and German shepherds. Her scent was picked up and followed from the trail near Klingman's Dome to a point about 1.5 miles from Newfound Gap Road, where it abruptly ended along the roadside. This detail raised disturbing possibilities. Had Trenny wandered off and gotten into a vehicle? If so, was it voluntary, or was she abducted? Some reports mentioned beer cans and cigarette butts found near the road, suggesting someone might have been waiting there. One of the students on the trip, Robert Simpson, was briefly considered a person of interest, especially after a hairbrush belonging to Trenny was found in his car. However, police cleared him of any wrongdoing. Adding to the mystery, Trenny's parents told authorities that a young man had previously broken into their home and that Trenny's mother had shot at him in self-defense. The man had later threatened to harm their daughter. While the police investigated this lead, it too went cold. Despite multiple large-scale searches, one lasting from October 1976 into the following spring and another in 1981, no trace of Trenny was ever found. No clothing, no belongings, no remains. A friend of hers, Kim Pouncey, gave an interview in 2017 where she theorized that Trenny may have left of her own accord, possibly meeting someone she had planned to escape with. But questions linger. Could a teenage girl truly orchestrate such a flawless escape unnoticed from a well-traveled trail during daylight in front of nearly 40 classmates? Or was she the victim of a carefully planned abduction? Without evidence, answers remain elusive. To this day, the Great Smoky Mountains hold their secrets, and the forest still whispers the name Trenny Lynn Gibson. Christy Lynn Vorak, vanished foster child. On Halloween night in 1982, a 13-year-old girl named Christy Lynn Vorak disappeared without a trace. Christy had been living with a foster family at the time of her disappearance in Seattle, Washington. Her case, though less publicized than some others, remains one of the most quietly disturbing and unsolved vanishings in American history. What makes her disappearance especially troubling is the lack of verifiable sightings, meaningful clues, or resolution even after 4 decades of searching. That Halloween evening, someone reportedly saw Christy at a bus stop. But beyond that, everything becomes hazy. The sighting was never confirmed, and no one could say for certain if it was actually her. Christy simply vanished into the night. She didn't return home. No friends knew where she was. There was no note, no phone call, no explanation. Christy was described as being 5 feet 3 inches tall and weighing around 110 pounds. She had brown hair and hazel eyes, and a birth defect made her middle finger on her left hand visibly shorter than the others, a detail that would later be used in attempts to identify her. Her case was particularly complex because she was living in foster care, a situation that can sometimes obscure the sense of routine or consistency in a child's life. With less public and familial visibility, some cases involving foster children tragically don't receive the same immediate attention or urgency as others. As the years passed, age progression photographs were created to show what Christie might look like as an adult. These haunting digital renderings were circulated in hopes of sparking recognition among the public. Authorities hoped someone somewhere might recognize a face they hadn't seen in years, but no credible leads ever materialized. For a time, investigators began to wonder whether Christie might have been one of the many victims of Gary Ridgway, infamously known as the Green River Killer. Ridgway was convicted of murdering dozens of women and girls, many of whom were runaway sex workers or otherwise vulnerable young women in the Seattle-Tacoma area. It's true that Christie had been known to spend time on the streets of Tacoma, where many of Ridgway's known victims were last seen, but this connection, while chilling, was never confirmed. What made investigators hesitate was Christie's age and profile. Most of Ridgway's known victims were older teenagers or women in their 20s, many of whom were involved in sex work or had been reported as runaways. Christie didn't fit that pattern. She was a young fostered teen with no known history of running away or engaging in high-risk behavior. Nevertheless, the sheer volume of Ridgway's suspected but unconfirmed victims led officials to add Christie's name to a tentative list of possible victims in May 1993, even though the link remained speculative. Christie's mother never gave up hope. She firmly believed her daughter was still alive somewhere waiting to be found. That hope kept her searching for years, even as the world moved on. But the authorities were less optimistic, believing that foul play had likely ended Christie's life long ago. Despite investigations, rumors, and possible connections to a notorious serial killer, Christie Lynn Vorak's fate remains a mystery. There's no closure, no justice, only a chilling void where a child once lived a silence that speaks volumes in a world where some stories end before they're even understood. The Marlborough Ghost Ship, Skeletons on Deck. The open sea has long been a canvas for mystery and legend, but few tales are as unnerving and perplexing as that of the Marlborough, a merchant ship that vanished without a trace in 1890. Only to reappear 23 years later, under circumstances that defy explanation. It's not uncommon for ships to be lost at sea due to storms, reefs, or icebergs, especially in the 19th century, when navigation relied on human instinct more than sophisticated technology. But the Marlborough's case stands apart, not because she was lost, but because of how she was found. In January 1890, the Marlborough set sail from Littleton, New Zealand, bound for London. Her cargo included wool and frozen meat, common exports at the time. The ship was a large iron bark, sturdy and capable of long journeys across treacherous seas. The route, however, took her past Cape Horn, one of the most dangerous maritime passages on Earth. Strong currents, submerged icebergs, unpredictable storms, and biting cold made this stretch of ocean notoriously deadly. When the Marlborough failed to arrive in London by April, it was assumed lost, another tragic casualty of the sea. Family members grieved, insurance claims were filed, and the world moved on. Ships disappeared all the time in the 1800s, and maritime tragedies were tragically common. But then, in 1913, over 2 decades later, the Marlborough was reportedly discovered again off the coast of Cape Horn. What the sailors who found her encountered was something out of a nightmare. On board the seemingly abandoned ship were approximately 20 skeletons scattered throughout various parts of the vessel. The positioning of the remains was what disturbed people most. The bodies weren't clumped together as though they had died from a collective event like drowning or exposure. Instead, They were found in places, suggesting they were engaged in everyday ship duties when death came. One skeleton was discovered beneath the wheel as if the person had died while trying to steer the ship. Several others were found at or near the bridge, and 3 were by the ladder that led below deck, frozen in time, perhaps attempting to flee or reach safety. The largest group, consisting of 10 skeletons, was found in the mess room, the ship's primary gathering area, where sailors would eat and talk. The eerie distribution suggested that whatever happened had occurred suddenly and affected all crew members at once. Speculation erupted. Did the crew succumb to a toxic gas leak? Did they suffer mass poisoning? Was there a mutiny followed by a violent confrontation? But none of these explanations accounted for the absence of visible trauma on the bones or the ship's relatively preserved condition. The scattered placement of bodies ruled out piracy, which would have likely involved visible violence or robbery. Some suggested that the ship had become trapped in ice or stranded after losing sails or steering capabilities, and the crew starved to death. But the idea that no one abandoned ship, that no one attempted escape using lifeboats, and that no SOS ever went out adds a sinister layer of confusion. Despite the horrifying discovery, no conclusive forensic analysis was ever conducted. Details of the find have since been questioned or lost to time, with some even doubting whether the discovery of the ship truly happened as reported. The mystery of the Marlborough has faded into the realm of nautical legend, but its chilling core remains a ship lost for decades, returning as a floating tomb, her crew locked forever in a silent, unsolvable puzzle. George Pensa, Disappearance in Yosemite Falls. Yosemite National Park is one of the crown jewels of American wilderness. Its towering granite cliffs, breathtaking waterfalls, and expansive valleys draw in millions of visitors each year. Yet beneath its natural beauty lies a more ominous truth. Yosemite has also been the site of several mysterious disappearances. Among them is the unsettling case of George Pensa, a 30-year-old man who vanished without a trace during a church group hike in 2011. Despite the crowded trails and numerous search efforts, no clue has ever surfaced. His disappearance remains a sobering reminder that even the most traveled paths can conceal danger. On June 17, 2011, a group of around 80 people from a church in Hawthorne, California, visited Yosemite. About 20 of them, including George, chose to hike the Upper Yosemite Falls Trail. Though challenging, the trail is well known and frequently traveled, offering hikers sweeping views of the tallest waterfall in the United States. The group made it to the summit successfully, and once there, they split up, agreeing to explore individually before regrouping at the trailhead. At some point during the descent, George became separated from the others. His friends assumed he had decided to hike back alone and didn't think much of it until hours passed, and he didn't return. Concern began to mount, and when darkness fell, George was officially reported missing at around 9:00 p.m. He was last seen wearing gray sweatpants with white stripes, a black DMB t-shirt, and carrying a blue cloth bag. Search and rescue operations began almost immediately. The National Park Service mobilized more than 100 personnel, including helicopter crews and 6 tracking dogs. But despite a massive ground and aerial search of the area, no trace of George was found, no clothing, no backpack, not even a footprint. It was as if he had vanished into thin air. Yosemite's own official warnings about the trail provide insight into its hazards. The upper half of the trail is steep, rocky, and bordered by sheer drop-offs. Do not stray from the maintained path, the Park Service warns. Yet it's possible that George did. A small misstep, a moment of disorientation, or an attempt to venture closer to the cliff's edge for a better view could have ended tragically. But even if he had fallen, authorities expected to find something. Yet they found nothing. What made the situation more perplexing was that George had appeared to be in good spirits that day. Fellow hikers said he didn't seem distressed or physically unwell. There were no reports of erratic behavior. So, how does a healthy adult disappear in broad daylight on a popular trail with dozens of people nearby? This case, along with many others in national parks across the U.S., has sparked growing public concern and curiosity. Some attribute such disappearances to the overwhelming vastness of the parks, millions of acres of rugged wilderness where even a short distance off-trail can lead to isolation. Others speculate darker possibilities, foul play, wild animal attacks, or even unexplained phenomena. Years have passed since George Penka's disappearance, and no further evidence has emerged. His family, friends, and the broader hiking community are left with only questions. The trail remains, the waterfall still roars, and tourists come and go, but George is still missing. His story, like the thundering falls he set out to witness, is now etched into the park's landscape as a solemn warning that nature, while majestic, can also be mercilessly silent. Lars Mittank, the most watched disappearance on YouTube. Lars Mittank's disappearance is perhaps one of the most chilling and widely viewed missing persons cases of the digital age. Captured on security footage at Varna Airport in Bulgaria, the final moments of Lars's known movements have captivated millions of viewers around the world. His case is unnerving not only because of the abrupt nature of his vanishing, but because it seemed to unfold in real time right before our eyes. The footage, still accessible online, shows a young man suddenly sprinting away from a place of safety, abandoning all his belongings as if fleeing from a threat no one else could see. To this day, his story raises far more questions than answers. It was July 2014, and 28-year-old Lars was on vacation with friends at the seaside resort town of Golden Sands, Bulgaria. They had been enjoying a typical summer holiday, sun, beach, and drinks, until a seemingly minor argument changed everything. Lars got into a confrontation with 4 men reportedly over football team rivalries. The altercation left him with a ruptured eardrum, which required medical attention. A local doctor advised him not to fly due to the risk of pressure-related complications and prescribed an antibiotic called cefuroxime. While his friends offered to stay behind, Lars insisted they return home without him. He checked into a low-budget hotel in Varna called Hotel Color and planned to fly back to Germany once he recovered. But over the next 24 hours, Lars's behavior took a disturbing turn. He called his mother in a hushed, panicked tone, claiming he was being followed and that he feared for his life. He even begged her to cancel his credit card, suggesting he was being targeted. That was the first major red flag. Surveillance footage from the hotel showed Lars pacing the hallways, hiding in elevators, and displaying clear signs of paranoia. The following day, he took a taxi to the airport. Cameras caught him walking in with his luggage, but minutes later, something terrified him. He left his suitcase behind and bolted out of the terminal, sprinting across the parking lot, past fences, and into a nearby wooded area. That footage would be the last verified sighting of Lars Mittank. What exactly happened in those moments? A doctor at the airport later described Lars as visibly nervous and agitated. He claimed that when Lars saw a construction worker nearby, he began to panic, saying, "I don't want to die here. I have to get out of here." His words paired with his actions hint at a deep and sudden psychological break, or something even more sinister. Many theories have been proposed over the years. Some believe he suffered a psychotic episode, possibly triggered by his injury, the antibiotics, or even substance use. Others suggest he may have been involved in or witnessed criminal activity, and that he fled out of genuine fear for his life. A darker possibility is that he was abducted or harmed in the forest, but no body, no clothing, and no clues have ever been found. His family continues to search for answers. Missing posters have been circulated internationally, and digital forums dedicated to solving his case remain active. But nearly a decade later, the trail has gone cold. The case of Lars Mittank is more than a mystery. It is a haunting representation of how quickly someone can disappear, even in a world filled with cameras, records, and people. In just a matter of minutes, a young man with plans to go home vanished, and all that remains is a video and an endless stream of questions. Iwona Wieczorek, the girl who walked alone. On the morning of July 17, 2010, in the Polish coastal city of Sopot, 19-year-old Iwona Wieczorek vanished while walking home after a night out with friends. Her disappearance has since become one of the most perplexing and high-profile missing person cases in Poland's modern history. With a trail captured on multiple CCTV cameras and a tight timeline of events, the mystery of Iwona's final steps continues to frustrate investigators, captivate the media, and haunt those who knew her. That evening, Iwona had been out celebrating the end of high school with her close friend Adria and a group of 3 male acquaintances. After spending time at a house party, the group made their way to the popular Dream Club in the early hours of the morning. But tensions flared. An argument broke out, details of which remain unclear, and Iwona decided to leave the club alone around 4:00 a.m. Frustrated and intoxicated, she began the nearly 4-mile walk back to her home, barefoot, having apparently removed her uncomfortable shoes. In a flurry of text messages and calls, Iwona expressed disappointment that her friend Adria hadn't followed her or tried to stop her from leaving. Adria later apologized and told Iwona she would leave her apartment keys outside in case she wanted to stay over, instead of returning to her own home in an inebriated state. Iwona never showed up. Despite the late hour, Iwona's route home was unusually well documented. Surveillance cameras along the coastal promenade and city streets recorded her steadily making her way through the neighborhood. She appeared alert, although tired, and showed no signs of distress. Yet the final seconds of her known footage introduce a sinister twist, a man seen walking behind her, casually but closely. His identity has never been confirmed. Despite his image being widely circulated both as photos and police sketches, no one has ever come forward to identify him. Adding to the unease are the inconsistencies in witness accounts. In 2014, Adria and one of the men from that night were interviewed for a televised segment on Iwona's case. Observers noted that neither could maintain eye contact during the interview. More curiously, neither of them could recall the specifics of the argument that led Iwona to leave the club in the first place. Was it simple forgetfulness or a sign they were hiding something the public has not forgotten? Iwona. In Poland, her name remains synonymous with cold cases that cry out for resolution. Over 12,000 threads and pages of discussion have accumulated on internet forums dedicated to uncovering what happened to her. Theories abound. Some believe she was abducted by someone she passed on the street, while others suspect her friends may know more than they've admitted. A disturbing theory suggests she may have become a victim of human trafficking, a concern raised by the region's increasing connections to international crime networks. Despite multiple searches, extensive police interviews, and even the use of cadaver dogs and advanced forensic analysis, no trace of Iwona has ever been recovered. No clothing, no phone, no remains. It's as if she was swallowed whole by the night itself. More than a decade has passed, but the mystery endures. Iwona's face still appears on missing persons posters and news features. Her mother continues to fight for answers, clinging to the hope that someone somewhere knows the truth, and that one day that truth will be spoken. The Carol A. Deering, Mutiny or Maritime Mystery. The story of the Carol A. Deering is one of the most enduring maritime mysteries in American history, dubbed the ghost ship of the Outer Banks. The vessel's sudden abandonment, eerily untouched galley, and missing crew have ignited over a century of speculation. Pirates, mutiny, hurricanes, and even paranormal theories have all been suggested. But despite government investigations and eyewitness reports, what exactly happened to the Deering and its crew remains unknown. The Carol A. Deering was a 5-masted schooner built in Bath, Maine in 1919. A sturdy and modern ship for her time, she was the last vessel constructed by the G.G. Deering Company and was designed to haul heavy loads of coal. On August 22, 1920, the ship set sail for Rio de Janeiro under the command of Captain William H. Merritt, accompanied by his son and a 10-man crew. But shortly into the journey, Merritt fell severely ill. The ship made an unexpected stop in Lewis, Delaware, where both the captain and his son disembarked. They were replaced by Captain Willis B. Wormel, a retired but respected sailor, and Charles McClellan, who stepped in as first mate. Despite the abrupt change in leadership, the voyage to Brazil went smoothly. The coal was delivered without issue. However, strange events began to unfold on the return trip. Captain Wormel, while docked in Barbados, confided to fellow captains that he distrusted his crew, especially McClellan. He noted tension aboard the ship and expressed unease, saying he trusted only the ship's engineer, Herbert Bates. Disturbingly, McClellan had reportedly said, "I'll get the captain before we get to Norfolk," a threat overheard by several individuals. As the Deering neared the U.S. coast in late January 1921, the oddities intensified. On January 29th, the ship was spotted by the Cape Lookout lightship off the coast of North Carolina. Unable to communicate via radio due to technical failure, the crew attempted to shout messages using a megaphone. Witnesses on the lightship later reported that the man using the megaphone had a foreign accent and seemed disoriented, unusual behavior for an officer. Even more puzzling was the sight of crew members wandering the quarterdeck, a place typically reserved for officers. 2 days later, on January 31st, the Deering was seen again, this time aground on the infamous Diamond Shoals off Cape Hatteras. The sails were still set, but the ship was clearly abandoned. Due to harsh weather, rescue crews were unable to board the ship until February 4th. When they finally did, what they found defied logic. The ship was empty. The crew's personal belongings, navigation equipment, logbooks, and lifeboats were all missing. Yet food remained on the stove as if abandoned mid-meal. The ship's binnacle, the device housing its compass, had been smashed open with a sledgehammer found nearby. It appeared the vessel had been deserted in haste, but with strange deliberation. The U.S. government launched a comprehensive investigation involving the Department of Commerce, the FBI, and even the State Department. Despite their efforts, no definitive explanation was found. The possibility of mutiny remains a leading theory, especially considering Captain Wormel's concerns and McClellan's threats. Others have posited piracy, prohibition-era rum runners, or even Soviet interference, though no evidence supports these claims. Not a single member of the Carroll A. Deering's crew was ever seen again. No bodies, no lifeboats, no wreckage washed ashore. The ship itself was deemed too damaged to salvage and was eventually scuttled at sea. To this day, the Carroll A. Deering stands as a haunting chapter in nautical history. Her empty decks and unfinished meal echo across the decades, a silent testimony to one of the most eerie and unresolved disappearances ever recorded on the high seas. Derek Luking, don't try to follow me. Don't try to follow me. Those chilling words were found scribbled on a note inside a parked vehicle in the Smoky Mountains, words that mark the beginning of one of the most haunting disappearances in recent history. The author of the note was Derek J. Luking, a 24-year-old man from Tennessee who vanished in March 2012 after leaving behind a cryptic trail, a vehicle full of survival gear and far more questions than answers. Luking, originally from Virginia, had moved to Knoxville, Tennessee to attend Johnson University. A recent graduate, he'd been working as an orderly at Peninsula Behavioral Health Center, a job his family described as a calling. Those who knew him said he had a servant's heart, always helping others. That's what made his sudden disappearance all the more unsettling. On March 15, 2012, Derek failed to show up for work. This was highly uncharacteristic, prompting immediate concern from his roommate and family. His family drove in from Virginia to search for him and soon discovered a trail of digital breadcrumbs. A search of Derek's computer revealed online activity related to the Great Smoky Mountains National Park, along with hotel reservations in Cherokee, North Carolina. They tracked him to a local hotel where security cameras showed him leaving his room on March 17th, 2 days after he failed to report to work. Inside the hotel room, they found 2 ominous items, a bottle of alcohol and a Bible items that hinted at an internal spiritual struggle. But things became more bizarre when Derek's vehicle, a Ford Escape, was discovered abandoned at the Newfound Gap parking lot, a popular trailhead on the Tennessee-North Carolina border. What was found inside the SUV raised even more eyebrows. Luking had packed a meticulously organized arsenal of survival gear, a pickaxe, compass lamp, pocket knife sharpener, tent, sleeping bag, 100 feet of black parachute cord, granola bars, a military survival guide, and a fire-starting belt containing a flashlight and multi-tool. His wallet, still full of cash, remained untouched. On the front seat was a piece of paper scrawled with the words, "Don't try to follow me." The note read like the beginning of a disappearance by design. Did he intend to disappear into the wilderness? Was he seeking spiritual solitude, a test of endurance, or something darker? Theories quickly formed. Some speculated Derek had planned a long hike to clear his mind. Others feared he intended to take his own life, though the purchase of $1,000 worth of survival equipment suggested otherwise. Despite massive search efforts, which included canine units, thermal imaging helicopters, and volunteers, no trace of Derek was ever found. Searchers noted that the trails around Newfound Gap are well marked, but veering off them can quickly lead into unforgiving wilderness dense with rhododendron thickets and steep ravines. Strangely, none of the surrounding brush showed signs of someone forcing their way through, suggesting Derek either avoided the main paths entirely or disappeared almost immediately upon leaving the parking lot. His father later said that Derek had recently begun smoking and drinking behaviors out of character for him. He had expressed dissatisfaction with his job and life direction, but his family insisted he was not suicidal. The message he left behind, brief but potent, continues to haunt them. Today, Derek Luking's case remains open but cold. There has never been a confirmed sighting, no physical remains, no gear recovered, nothing beyond that lonely vehicle and the ominous note inside. It's as though he stepped off the edge of the known world and dissolved into the silence of the Smokies. Griffin Lake car discovery, mystery solved. After 30 years. For 3 long decades, the disappearance of Janet Ferris haunted her family. In 1992, the 70-year-old Canadian woman vanished while driving to a wedding in Alberta, with no witnesses, no crash site, and no leads. The case grew cold and remained one of Canada's quietest unsolved mysteries until a chance discovery in 2019 by a curious teenager brought long-awaited answers and a haunting image of how some disappearances are hidden in plain sight. Janet had been traveling alone from Vancouver Island, British Columbia, to a family wedding in Alberta, a journey of over 200 kilometers, when she vanished without a trace. Her loved ones reported her missing after she failed to arrive, but no clues ever surfaced. Police assumed her vehicle had somehow gone off the road, but with no specific location to search and no witnesses, they had nothing to go on. Search efforts eventually tapered off, and her name joined the long list of unresolved missing persons in Canada. Then, 27 years later, 13-year-old Max Warenka was boating with his family on Griffin Lake in British Columbia when he noticed something unusual under the water, what appeared to be the outline of a car submerged several meters below the surface. The murky water made it difficult to tell what it was at first, but Max couldn't shake the suspicion that it might be connected to something important. A few days later, Max returned with a GoPro camera determined to investigate. He dove into the chilly lake and filmed what lay beneath the surface. What he captured was chilling the unmistakable shape of a car, upside down, partially buried in the lake bed. The family immediately contacted the authorities. When police arrived with diving equipment, they confirmed the discovery. The vehicle was a black 1980s Honda Accord, registered to none other than Janet Ferris. Inside the car were human remains and her belongings perfectly preserved in the cold, still waters of the lake. It was the answer her family had waited nearly 30 years for. Investigators believe that Janet may have swerved to avoid an animal or simply lost control on the winding road that passes beside the lake. In 1992, there were no guardrails in place along that stretch, and the terrain around the lake makes it possible for a vehicle to plunge into the water unnoticed. With no tire marks, debris, or skid marks left behind and the car submerged out of view, it's easy to see how the crash was missed for so long. What makes this story particularly haunting is the quiet, undisturbed nature of Griffin Lake itself. Hundreds of visitors had paddled, swum, and boated over the very spot where Janet's car lay hidden for decades, completely unaware of the mystery resting just meters below. Janet Farris's story is a powerful reminder that sometimes mysteries persist not because they are complex, but because they are concealed by the most ordinary of veils: distance, water, silence. Her family finally found peace after decades of wondering, thanks to the curiosity and intuition of a young boy. In a world filled with unsolved disappearances, Janet's case provides something rare resolution. Yet it also deepens the mystery of all the others, still missing those who may be closer than we realize, waiting to be found. Terrence Woods, Jr., The Vanishing on a Film Set. On October 5, 2018, 27-year-old Terrence Woods, Jr. disappeared into the rugged wilderness of Idaho without a trace while working on a television documentary shoot. A promising young production assistant from Maryland, Terrence had traveled west to work on a series for the Discovery Channel. But what should have been a routine field assignment turned into a haunting mystery that remains unresolved to this day. His sudden vanishing in broad daylight in front of a film crew has raised disturbing questions about what really happened and whether someone is hiding the truth. Terrence had an impressive resume for someone his age, with prior work at major media outlets like NBC and the BBC. Quiet, respectful, and intelligent, he was known for being responsible and driven. His father, Terrence Sr., described him as a homebody with a gentle soul and a deep love for his family. His decision to take the job on Gold Rush Dave Turin's Lost Mine, which involved remote filming in Idaho, was out of character but not alarming. He wanted to gain more field experience in the industry he loved. The production was being shot near the isolated Oro Grande mining district, a remote and rugged area in Idaho County. On the day of his disappearance, the crew had wrapped for the day and was preparing to return to base camp. According to reports, Terrence suddenly set down his radio, removed his headset, and sprinted into the dense forest without explanation, leaving crew members stunned. They said he didn't appear agitated beforehand. It was as though something snapped, or as if he had seen something no one else had. Within an hour, search and rescue teams began combing the area. They used helicopters, scent tracking dogs, and volunteers over several days, but no trace of Terrence was ever found. No clothing, no gear, no footprints, nothing. The terrain is harsh, full of steep ravines, loose rocks, and dense foliage, yet not a single clue emerged. Experienced trackers said it was as if he had disappeared into thin air. What has fueled suspicion in Terrence's case is the conflicting information from the production crew. While some said he was behaving normally, others claimed he had been acting odd in the days prior, withdrawn, quiet, and possibly paranoid. Yet his father disputes this, pointing out that Terrence had spoken to him just days before the incident and sounded fine. Adding to the confusion, there were delays in alerting Terrence's family. His parents weren't informed of the disappearance until nearly 24 hours later, and the production company reportedly did not assist much with the search efforts or provide clear answers. Terrence's father has raised serious concerns about how his son's case was handled, noting that no major media outlets covered the story in depth, and that authorities seemed too quick to dismiss the case as a mental health episode or voluntary disappearance. He strongly believes that racism and indifference played a role in the lack of urgency and attention. As the years have passed, the mystery only deepens. Was Terrence the victim of foul play? Did he witness something he wasn't supposed to see? Or was he battling an internal crisis that no one recognized? The fact that he vanished in the presence of colleagues during the daytime in a relatively controlled environment makes the case all the more troubling. Terrence Woods Jr.'s story is a painful reminder that not all vanishings happen in the shadows. Some unfold right in front of us, without warning, without logic, and without resolution. For his family, the unanswered questions linger like a wound that refuses to heal. And until those questions are answered, Terrence's name remains another echo in the long corridor of unexplained disappearances. Brandon Swanson, The Call from the Ditch. In the early hours of May 14, 2008, 19-year-old Brandon Swanson disappeared in the flat open farmlands of rural Minnesota, and no one has seen or heard from him since. His final known moments were shared in a chilling phone call with his father, during which Brandon calmly described walking along a gravel road toward a town's lights, only to suddenly exclaim, "Oh, shit," and fall silent. That was the last anyone heard from him. Brandon had just completed his first year at Minnesota West Community and Technical College and was celebrating with friends in Canby, Minnesota. Despite drinking earlier in the evening, his friends said he appeared sober when he left around midnight to drive home to Marshall, a nearby town. Somewhere along the way, Brandon's car ended up in a ditch. Uninjured, but unable to get the vehicle back on the road, he called his parents around 1:54 a.m. for help. The conversation that followed is now legendary in true crime circles, disturbing in its calmness, tragic in its finality. Brandon told his parents he believed he was near Lind, a small town southwest of Marshall. His father, Brian, drove out to search for him based on those directions while staying on the phone with Brandon. The two talked for nearly 47 minutes. During that time, Brandon described his surroundings, noted seeing lights in the distance which he believed were from Lind, and insisted he would walk toward a nearby road to meet his father. But the search proved fruitless. Brian drove up and down the roads near Lind, honking his horn repeatedly, yet Brandon never heard the car. Likewise, Brandon never saw any headlights. It soon became clear that Brandon might not have been where he thought he was. Then, as Brandon was walking and talking, his tone shifted. He suddenly said, "Oh shit," and the line went dead. He never picked up again. The Swansons called the police, but were initially met with the typical, "he's probably just a runaway" attitude. It wasn't until the following day that a full search was initiated. Authorities quickly located Brandon's car, not near Lind as he thought, but more than 20 miles away outside a town called Taunton. The vehicle was stuck in a shallow ditch off a gravel road undamaged. This revelation only deepened the mystery. How could Brandon have been so wrong about his location? And more disturbingly, where had he gone? A massive search ensued, including scent dogs, helicopters, and hundreds of volunteers. Dogs tracked Brandon's scent from his vehicle along a gravel road, then across fields to the edge of the Yellow Medicine River. Some dogs indicated he had crossed it, but the trail eventually vanished. Despite extensive river searches and ground efforts over many years, not a single piece of physical evidence, no clothing, no phone, no remains, has ever been recovered. Brandon's case has inspired legislative change. In response to the poor initial handling by law enforcement, Minnesota passed Brandon's Law in 2009. It requires police to immediately file a missing persons report and begin investigating if the individual is believed to be in danger, regardless of age or perceived circumstance. Theories about what happened to Brandon Swanson range from a tragic accidental fall into the river or a nearby well to an encounter with wildlife or even foul play. Yet none fully explain why not a trace of him has ever been found in such a flat, sparsely wooded area. Brandon's last words and the way he vanished mid-sentence still haunt his family and community. The silence that followed that phone call has never been broken, and until it is the farmland of Minnesota, holds tightly to one of America's most unsettling unsolved mysteries. Maura Murray, the Internet's first missing person. On February the 9th, 2004, 21-year-old Maura Murray vanished without a trace after crashing her car on a rural road in Haverhill, New Hampshire. What followed would become one of the most widely discussed missing persons cases of the 21st century, spawning endless theories, podcasts, Reddit threads, and documentaries. Often called the first missing person of the social media age, Maura's disappearance captured the public imagination, not just for the mystery itself, but for the countless unanswered questions and strange circumstances that surrounded her final days. Maura was a nursing student at the University of Massachusetts Amherst, known for being intelligent, athletic, and highly private. In the days leading up to her disappearance, she made a series of puzzling choices. She emailed professors to say there had been a death in the family there hadn't. She packed up her dorm room, withdrew money from her bank account, and purchased alcohol. She then got in her car and drove north, leaving campus, without telling anyone why or where she was going. It remains unclear what prompted this abrupt departure. Some believe she was planning to escape the pressures of school and life. Others think she may have been meeting someone. Her destination was likely the White Mountains, where she had vacationed before with family. Surveillance footage shows her calmly purchasing snacks and alcohol at a liquor store in Amherst before heading north. She never told her boyfriend, friends, or family what she was doing. It was as if she was deliberately erasing herself. Around 7:27 p.m., Maura crashed her black Saturn on Route 112 near Haverhill. A local resident called 911 to report the accident. Another neighbor briefly spoke to Maura and said she seemed shaken but unharmed. She declined help, saying she had already called for roadside assistance, but records later showed she hadn't. Within 7 to 10 minutes, when the police arrived, Maura was gone, vanished into the frigid New Hampshire night. Her belongings, including her wallet, cell phone, and bags, were missing from the car, yet there were no footprints leading away in the snow. No signs of a struggle and no witnesses. It was as if she had been swallowed by the landscape. The lack of concrete leads quickly turned Maura's case into an internet obsession. Online sleuths combed through every detail of her life, her academic troubles, a past legal issue involving stolen credit card information, relationship tensions, and family dynamics. Some theorized she staged her disappearance and started a new life. Others believed she met with foul play, abducted by a passerby or a local predator. There were even suggestions of suicide or accidental death after fleeing the crash on foot. But the sheer volume of theories has often obscured the human core of the story, a young woman struggling under pressures we may never fully understand. Her family has tirelessly advocated for answers, conducting their own searches and battling law enforcement for transparency. Despite countless efforts, including extensive searches and media coverage, no confirmed trace of Maura has ever been found. Maura Murray's case remains open and deeply polarizing. It exemplifies how modern disappearances differ from those in the past, not just in how they are investigated, but in how they are publicly consumed and dissected. The internet has kept her story alive for 2 decades, but it has also muddied it with speculation, misinformation, and obsession. To this day, Maura's final movements remain one of the most enduring puzzles of the true crime world. Her story is a haunting portrait of vanishing in plain sight, and a reminder that in our hyper-connected world, it's still possible to disappear completely. The vanishing of the Sodder children, a house fire that left no ashes. In the early morning hours of Christmas Day, 1945, the Sodder family home in Fayetteville, West Virginia, went up in flames. George and Jenny Sodder escaped the inferno with 4 of their 10 children, but 5 others who had been sleeping upstairs were never seen again. What followed was one of the most baffling and controversial disappearances in American history. Despite the home burning to the ground, no remains of the missing children were ever found, leading to decades of suspicion, conspiracy theories, and a desperate search for answers that spanned a lifetime. George Sodder, a successful Italian immigrant businessman, and his wife Jenny had built a comfortable life for their large family. On Christmas Eve 1945, they celebrated together at home. Around 1 a.m., a fire broke out, quickly engulfing the structure. George, Jenny, and 4 of their children managed to flee, but 5, Maurice 14, Martha 12, Louis 9, Jenny 8, and Betty 5, were trapped inside. Or were they? Despite the fire department's slow response, they didn't arrive until nearly 8 a.m. The fire was completely out by then, yet no trace of the children's bodies was ever discovered. Not even bones, teeth, or fragments that would have been expected even after intense flames. Fire experts later concluded that the blaze was not hot enough or long enough to completely incinerate 5 bodies. This fact became the foundation of the Sodders' belief that their children had not died in the fire at all, but had been kidnapped. The oddities surrounding the fire and its aftermath only deepened the mystery. The family had noticed strange occurrences in the days prior. A man had come to the house asking about hauling work and had walked around back pointing to the fuse boxes. A separate individual had threatened George, saying his home would go up in smoke due to his outspoken political views. On the night of the fire, Jenny had received a strange phone call from a woman asking for someone they didn't know, followed by laughter and clinking glasses in the background. Even more disturbingly, George later found that his ladder, normally kept by the side of the house, was missing. It was later discovered tossed down a nearby embankment. A phone repairman confirmed that the Sodders' telephone line had been deliberately cut, not damaged by fire. A neighbor claimed to have seen people throwing balls of fire onto the roof. Jenny later found what she believed to be a pineapple bomb in the yard, possibly an incendiary device. Over the years, there were numerous reported sightings of the Sodder children, including one from a woman working at a Charleston hotel who said she saw the children with 2 men and 2 women of Italian descent. Another tip came from a woman who claimed she saw a photo of one of the Sodder girls in a convent in St. Louis. In 1968, the Sodders received a photograph in the mail of a young man who bore a striking resemblance to what Louis Sodder might have looked like as an adult. The back read, "Louis Sodder, I love brother Frankie. Illeal boys, A90132 or 35. The message was cryptic and no further clues were ever found. Yet it revived the Sodders' hope and obsession. They even erected a billboard on Route 16 with pictures of the children and a $10,000 reward later increased to $15,000, offering clues about their fate. For decades, that billboard stood as both a memorial and a cry for help. The Sada children mystery endures because it defies closure. If they perished in the fire, where are the remains? If they were kidnapped, why and by whom? This case is more than a mystery. It is a symbol of parental grief, relentless hope, and the human need for resolution. To this day, no evidence has definitively answered what happened that Christmas night, making it one of the most chilling unsolved cases in American history. The disappearance of Laureen Rahn, Lights, Lies, and a Vanished Girl. On the night of April 27, 1980, 14-year-old Laureen Rahn vanished from her apartment in Manchester, New Hampshire. Her mother, Judith, returned home to find the front door unlocked, the hallways dark and the television still on. Laureen's shoes and purse were inside, but she was not. It was as if the girl had simply melted into the night. More than 4 decades later, her case remains unsolved, shrouded in strange coincidences, misleading clues, and a web of eerie phone calls that have only deepened the mystery. Laureen was a bright-spirited teen with dreams of becoming an actress. She was home alone that Sunday night, while her mother and her mother's boyfriend attended a nearby tennis match. When Judith returned home shortly after midnight, she found the apartment unusually quiet. Laureen's bed appeared to have been slept in, but the back door, which was usually bolted, was open. The hallway light bulbs had been unscrewed. A friend who had reportedly been with Laureen earlier that night claimed Laureen had been drinking and that he'd fallen asleep only to awaken and find her gone. From the start, investigators suspected a runaway scenario. But Judith was adamant her daughter had no reason to flee, and she left behind money makeup and personal items she would have taken. Within weeks, the case began to take on a more ominous tone, particularly when a series of bizarre phone calls began to emerge. In the months following Laureen's disappearance, Judith received multiple phone calls late at night. Sometimes no one would speak. Other times, a whisper or a soft breath was all she heard. On several occasions, the calls came from motels in California, including one known to be frequented by sex workers and pornographers. The phone company confirmed the origin of at least 3 such calls, 2 from a Santa Monica motel and another from Santa Ana. But despite the promising leads, authorities could never confirm whether Laureen had been there. One of the strangest elements of the case was that Judith discovered a mysterious phone bill showing calls made from California to a teen sexual assistance hotline run by a doctor in Los Angeles. The doctor denied knowing Laureen, but admitted that multiple runaways had passed through his program. When asked if Laureen might have been one of them, he couldn't say definitively. Some theorists speculate she may have been lured into a sex trafficking ring or abducted by someone who pretended to help runaways. Adding to the confusion, Judith later received a phone call from a young woman who claimed to be Laureen. The caller quickly hung up when Judith asked direct questions. Years later, another woman who had gone missing around the same time reappeared and insisted she had known Laureen in California, but no evidence could confirm her story. Despite the time that has passed, Judith Rahn never gave up hope. She appeared on television shows and remained active in trying to solve her daughter's case, haunted by the idea that Laureen may have fallen into the hands of dangerous people. The eerie trail of clues, the unscrewed bulbs, silent calls, motel links, and California connections suggests a fate far darker than a teenage runaway scenario. Loreen Rahn's disappearance remains one of the most haunting unsolved cases in New Hampshire history. It reminds us how easily a child can vanish, and how the line between hope and horror can blur when darkness falls without warning. Each unanswered call, each fragment of a lead, only deepens the silence that surrounds what happened that night in 1980. The disappearance of Brian Schaffer, a locked room, mystery in the 21st century. Brian Schaffer's vanishing is one of the most perplexing modern mysteries, an enigma that defies logic, surveillance footage, and time itself. On the night of March 31st, 2006, Brian, a 27-year-old medical student at Ohio State University, went out to celebrate the start of spring break. He was seen entering a popular Columbus bar called the Ugly Tuna Saloona, but was never seen leaving. Despite extensive surveillance, exhaustive searches, and worldwide media attention, no trace of Brian has ever been found. His disappearance has since become known as the modern locked room mystery, capturing the imagination and frustration of investigators and the public alike. That Friday night, Brian met with his friend William Clint Florence for drinks. The two bar-hopped through the Arena District, eventually ending up at the Ugly Tuna, located on the second floor of a building with only one public entrance and a service exit monitored by security cameras. Footage from around 1:15 a.m. shows Brian at the bar's entrance laughing and talking with two women. He appears relaxed and in good spirits. Moments later, he walks out of frame, presumably heading back into the bar, and then nothing. He was never seen again. Not on any camera, not by any witness. It was as if he had vanished into thin air. What makes this case especially bizarre is the tight surveillance coverage. The bar's main entrance was monitored by a camera that caught everyone who came and went. Brian was never captured on camera, leaving not through the front, not through the service exit, not even slipping out behind another group. Investigators reviewed the footage countless times, even considering whether he might have changed clothes or disguised himself, but no anomalies were found. The digital eye missed nothing except Brian's departure. In the days and weeks that followed, police scoured the area, reviewed more than 50 hours of surveillance footage from nearby establishments, and conducted searches of dumpsters, construction sites, rooftops, and the river. Nothing. Even search dogs couldn't pick up a reliable scent. Brian's apartment showed no signs of disturbance, and his car was still parked outside. His bank account, credit cards, and cell phone showed no activity after that night. Adding to the mystery was the behavior of his friend Clint, who refused to take a polygraph test and has remained largely silent about the events of that night. While not a suspect, his reluctance sparked suspicion among armchair detectives and internet sleuths alike. Brian's father, Randy Schaffer, became a tireless advocate for his son, launching websites, coordinating searches, and holding out hope. Tragically, in 2008, Randy died in a freak accident when a tree fell on him during a storm, never knowing what happened to his son. In a poignant twist, someone left a comment on Brian's memorial page, reading, "Dad, I love you. Brian, U.S. Virgin Islands." But the IP address was traced to a public computer, and the message was ultimately dismissed as a cruel prank. Over the years, numerous theories have surfaced. Some believe Brian fell victim to foul play, perhaps from someone inside the bar. Others think he may have died accidentally and was hidden by others to avoid blame. The idea that he left to start a new life, though unlikely to those who knew him, has not been ruled out. His girlfriend, who had expected a marriage proposal during their planned vacation shortly after, firmly believed he would never vanish voluntarily. What remains chilling is the silence, the digital void where there should be data, the empty frames where Brian should be. In an age where nearly every movement is tracked, his disappearance stands as a stark reminder, even now with all our technology. People can simply vanish. Brian Schaffer's story is more than a mystery. It is a modern ghost story, a haunting, unsolved riddle suspended in a world of cameras, data, and unanswered questions.